thanks again for joining us. This is a brand new series by Augmentt called Augmenttors. Is that a little bit cheesy? Yes, it is, but we're a big fan of cheese over here at Augmentt. And the whole premise of this web series is we're avoiding salesy kind of aspects of conversation. I'm taking the opportunity to speak on a monthly basis to some of the smartest, most well-connected, most experienced people that I've had the pleasure of meeting across the channel to pick their brain about some of the key things that they've experienced, that they know about, and so that we can share that information with MSPs. So today, I'm really, really excited to get the ball rolling and be joined by Jamison West from msp+os. Jamison, hello, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, and Jamison, just for so folks know, where are you calling in from?
Las Vegas. Yeah.
Las Vegas, Nevada. That's lovely. Yeah, we're up here in Ontario, Canada. For anyone else who's kind of up in the northerly parts of North America, I'm sure we're getting all that snow, but none of the white stuff down in Vegas, right, Jamison?
None, not at all. I mean, it happens once in a rare while, but hopefully not this year.
Okay, and we're super excited to talk today, guys, about building culture guides and accountability charts. So a great way to kickstart the year 2024. We're still in January. Everyone's kind of got that new year, new me. I'm sure there's lots of companies out there that are saying similar things like this is going to be our year, or we want to implement some positive changes. And Jameson, you and I met at IT Nation last year and had a great chat about culture and accountability. And so was really excited to get you on episode 1 of Augmenttors. But maybe so people can understand a little bit about your background. And can you tell us a little bit about some of the different projects, companies, and areas you've been involved with in the past?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. I started an IT services company back in 1995 and owned that for 21 years, roughly. Grew it into an MSP, did about 4 acquisitions, and sold in 2016. So I definitely have been in most of your audience's shoes and I've gone through all the trials and tribulations and growth challenges and acquisition challenges and really speaking to culture and accountability, bringing 5 organizations together under one roof in short order created tremendous challenges and really kind of drove me towards this passion around how do we do that in a creative, positive way. Once I left that business, I was fortunate enough to be a co-founder surrounded by some smart folks, and have done 3 software projects: Teamatics, Smileback, which I did help sell to ConnectWise, and currently Chief Strategy Officer of TimeZest as well, and co-founder of TimeZest. And then finally, several years ago, while I was working on all those software projects, I began just coaching MSPs around, originally EOS, but really kind of broke off from that and really focused on just MSPs and how to create stronger leadership and process. So we focus on impact, vision, strategy, and execution. I did that under the ConnectStrat was the name of the company. And recently, very, very recently, 5 consultancies, including my coaching company, all came together and created msp+os, just really serving the next generation MSPs globally.
That's awesome. That's certainly quite the resume, Jameson. So yeah, really happy to have you here today and kind of pick your brain about a couple of things. So, as someone who's been there, done that, built and grown and scaled multiple teams, let's dive in a little bit to how you've done that through the lens of culture and accountability. So, one of the things that I know a lot of other people hear, it's that classic phrase of whenever you're building a team and having strong teamwork or a good culture, everyone needs to be singing off the same hymn sheet or pulling in the same direction. So what do you think are some of the key principles that help achieve that?
Well, it starts with clarity from the owner and then leadership team. And I always start working with my clients, usually with just the owner, and then expand to leadership team to ensure that the vision of the organization and is very, very clear. What's our big, hairy, audacious goal? What's our purpose? Why are we all doing this? Who are we trying to serve? And what are our clear goals and objectives? What's our strategy to differentiate and do that over the next few years? When you get everybody super clear around where we're going, why we're going there, how we're going to behave along the way. That's the cultural component, and how we're going to do it, the strategy component. When you get everybody aligned around that, it really creates both a culture and an engine that can start to move forward in a more creative way. Organizations can move forward sometimes under duress without positive culture. That can happen. You've seen large enterprises do that, but it's a lot more fun when you have clarity of direction in a strong culture.
For sure. I mean, let's maybe even sort of start by defining culture. It's a word that's so common sort of in business, and you see it when people are hiring. Everyone talks about culture. Everyone wants a good culture. It's a word that gets used a lot today. What would you say your definition of a company culture is?
Yeah, it's so the definition of a culture, and it's not defining a good or a bad culture, but really the definition of a culture is shared values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that define any group of people, right? So a family has a culture, a group of friends has a culture, a company has a culture. And it really includes like how people work with each other, how decisions are made, the way work is done. It's all kind of directed by those shared beliefs, values, and behaviors. So we want to be, what happens in an organization is you'll always have, culture is going to happen no matter what, accidentally or intentionally. So what's important is that ownership and leadership understands that, and they begin to get very intentional around what they want to see their culture to look like. And they learn how to implement and support that through the growth of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's another phrase that comes up as well as like a cultural fit, right? You can have a very, very qualified, capable, competent applicant, but maybe sometimes they're just not going to be a cultural fit, like you said. So when it comes to a company, like how are we getting the work done? How do we treat each other? That kind of thing. Maybe you have some stories for us later about that firsthand. But one of the other things I wanted to tap into was understanding what culture is. What are some of the ingredients that you feel help support and create a strong company culture?
Yeah, I think that it starts a little bit with my first answer, like having a very strong alignment from above, clarity of the direction and the vision, mission, and purpose of the organization. Also having clear goals and objectives. But I think when we go back to values and behaviors, it really starts with the owners of the organization and the most senior leaders being aligned around what do we want? How do we want to treat each other? How do we want to treat our customers? How do we want to treat each other as team members? What makes people happy to be here? What are we all aligned in our goals and objectives? Do we have opportunities for growth and development? Do we recognize good performance? Do we foster a sense of community and belonging? Do we take action to do something when somebody's not aligned to our culture and our core values? And that's why, I really, there's something that I'll say, it's maybe not everybody's has thought about a lot. There's this idea that everybody knows of core values. They're these very lofty ideas. I've been in front of large audiences where I've said, I'm going to say 7 words, and if I hit 3 or more of your core values, I want you to stand up. And I'll say integrity, customer service, and then everybody in the room's like, oh, you hit most of mine. And nothing's differentiating about them because they're just concepts or ideas that are idealistic, and that's great, but it doesn't really define internally what a culture looks like. I believe there has to be more meat on the bone. So I subscribe pretty heavily to the idea of a culture guide, which is a definitive, more objective version describing the emotional and behavioral expectations of the people in the organization. Really getting clear, black and white, about here's what it looks like, how we're going to treat each other here. So instead of saying integrity, you might say, when you say you're going to do something, you complete it on time, or if you can't, you communicate back to the person about, like, we're describing what integrity means specifically, instead of just allowing everybody to make up their own definition of integrity. And that allows an organization not only to get super clear on what that culture looks like, but it becomes differentiated and it becomes scalable, because I can go I can go to a manager I may have a new manager in my organization has 7 direct reports. And I said, we have integrity, we like good customer service, and go get them. And they don't know what that, great. But if I say very definitively, this is exactly how we treat each other and our clients, these are expectations. And if you're not doing it, I'm going to challenge you to, it becomes repeatable and scalable, and it really enforces that strong culture.
Right. So putting in, like, for another example there, you mentioned integrity, but something like customer service, again, it's not just enough to say we offer good customer service. What you're saying is you have to get specific. Like, what does that mean? Well, what are the boxes that you can tick and show to say, yes, I've achieved good customer service? So whether that's, your SLA response time, whether that's how you actually talk to people in a courteous or polite manner, your email tone, picking up the phone, and actually as a leadership group and a company setting out those clear actions of the boxes that you need to tick.
100%. Because then now you've got this objective clarity. And every time as a leader or a manager, I've just in my guts that I'm struggling with this individual, or somebody's not behaving, something just doesn't feel right, or maybe it's really explicit and I know what it is. When I go to a culture guide, and maybe for my average client, it's 25 to 30 behaviors, I can usually go find, or always, not usually, I can always go find 1, 2, 3, 4 behaviors that created that sense of this is, grinding against the culture or the expectation that I had. As opposed to getting an argument over what customer service means, I'll be like, wow, you were slightly rude here in this response, or you were curt, or you didn't get back to him for 4 days. And we don't do that. We expect 1 hour. And I can get very specific in addressing the issue. And so it really highlights problematic. Well, you talked about having that sense that you have the wrong person in your organization. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure. But it's that you might have heard the metaphor is get the right people on the bus and then put them in the right seat. And somebody can be in the right seat, but not on the right bus. And that has to be addressed early.
Okay. Maybe just coming back to the you mentioned there about, where does this start? It comes from leadership identifying that value, that mission. For a lot of MSPs, maybe on the smaller side, where say, they might only have like 10 or 12 employees, something like that, and are growing. And this is something that they want to use to really help drive, team efficacy across the board. Is it something that just the owners, say like the 2 or 3 co-owners, should be doing together? Is it an opportunity to invite all of the staff in? Obviously, that probably wouldn't work if you're a very, very large company, but what would you recommend for, based on company size, if you're going to implement some of these tools? The starting point, does it start with leadership? Does it start with everyone? What's the best way to set that cornerstone for building a culture and setting up the
I feel a little differently than some others on this. I feel pretty strongly that it has to start with ownership. It has to start. That doesn't mean ownership dictates this is exactly what the culture guide is going to look like and everybody do this or else. That's not what I'm saying. But one thing, at the end of the day, the owner of the culture, if you have a single shareholder that owns 100% of the company, whatever everybody else says at the end of the day isn't going to matter if they don't take ownership of the expected emotional and behavioral expectations of the team. They have to live those. So it has to start there. I think a problem that some systems I've seen out there, something that I've seen that's problematic is creating this democratic methodology to create our core values or culture guide on a leadership team, when that leadership team, if it's an unhealthy organization, may create exactly the wrong thing and take you down the wrong path. So I really do work at first with owners to say, look, you've taken all of the risk to be entrepreneurial and go start an organization. And one of the benefits, it's a lot of risk, but one of the benefits you get is you get to work with the people you choose to work with. You get to hire them. You get to go build an organization in your mind's eye. What are those people? How do they treat you? How do they treat each other? Who do you want to be with day to day? That's a choice an owner gets to make. And so they begin to say, wow, if I could take 50 people like this, we'd go conquer the world. Great. What does that look like? Now, go to the leadership team and share that, even if it's just conceptually, not specifically, work through that with leadership and get buy-in and figure out who's like completely on that same team with you, and work with them to build it and refine it until you get to the point that the leadership team's bought it. And you may have somebody on the leadership team who's not connected with that. You may have somebody on a leader. If you've never done this exercise, and I've seen it, I'm not making it up. I've seen leadership team members realize at the end of the exercise, they're not at the right firm and leave. And that's the best thing for the firm that could happen. So you've got to start with the owner, bring it to leadership team. And once you're all consolidated and bought in, now it spreads through the rest of the organization. I would say when you ask about the rest of the organization, they don't really build the culture guide or expectations, but you find out really quickly who's excited about it. I love the idea of a culture committee and supporting it, pushing it, getting everybody behind it once the leadership team's all aligned.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Jameson, about it's something that I'd never really thought of before, and something I haven't heard before. But the idea of being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, one of the biggest advantages is you get to hire the people you work with. You get to choose who you spend your time with and who helps kind of build your vision in your company. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really good point. The key thing I'm picking up here as well is that transparent and open communication has to be a big part of this process as well, right? Whether it's the top leadership, committees underneath that, the company as a whole, the team as a whole. What would you suggest, or have you got any, success stories or horror stories for creating an environment where people feel safe and valued enough to share their opinions, their struggles, their ideas, their needs, or push back on some things that they might not agree with, or if they see leadership exhibiting examples contrary to the culture that they say they want to create?
Yeah, I lots, tremendous number of stories and examples, but what I would say is, first of all, the expectation that you're safe to speak up is usually one of the first things I'll push for in a culture guide. It's like we create an environment of safety and inclusion, and we listen, and we're always trying to improve and support. I've been a member of Entrepreneurs Organization for like 11 or 12 years. Huge fan, probably a lifetime member. One of my very first people I was informed with created a platform called Tiny Pulse, which I implemented immediately on my MSP, which allowed for anonymous and non-anonymous feedback to leadership and everywhere else in the organization, allowed people who were less likely to, speak up in public to provide feedback. I always found that was tremendously helpful. I'd literally read those without preview during open staff meetings twice a month and answer whatever question came up. And that transparency and vulnerability went a long ways toward building trust, right? So it builds trust. If you have a great culture, you don't need that. You don't need that sense of anonymity that platform created. But until you have that deeply instilled sense of trust and communication, that's something I'd really recommend. And then the other thing I'd say is, I do love the idea of a culture committee or a group of people who we have this nice graphic that we use. There's an average organization, let's say 80% of people sit right in the middle. They don't really attract people from a culture perspective. They kind of follow folks. 10% are really positive culture people, and 10% are kind of the Eeyores, sit by drinking fountain, pulling them. So you've got this tension going either way, and you've got all these people in the middle of your organization who are going to follow. And this goes back to intention. We want to reward the people who are aligned to our cultural expectations, and we want to have private conversations to quickly correct or remove the people who are constantly pulling against our expectations of where our culture needs to go. So we're constantly reinforcing that positive pull. Culture is not just a bunch of words written on the wall, and it's not just everybody getting together for happy hour. But I do believe very strongly in including, once it's aligned, including people throughout the organization in the implementation. So whether that is hey, how are we going to go do something to celebrate this success in a way that's aligned with how we treat each other? How are we going to getting a culture committee or something, or a group of people who you know are pulling people the right way, aligned and meeting and thinking about this, without it just being owners and leadership, because then it just feels dictated again. That's a wonderful thing as well. Even in a very small organization, my MSP was 7 to 12 people for years, because it's a natural glass ceiling for an organization before they figure out how to break out beyond that. And like many organizations, I had a front desk person. She was amazing, and she was the culture. Like I was like, without her, I think it would break sometimes, because some of my engineers sometimes. But so I relied on her heavily, and then a couple other people on our team to just help think about how we could celebrate big wins culturally in the organization.
Jamison, do you mind talking a little bit more about some of the, because I love the idea of, accountability goes both ways, right? Leadership want to have staff accountable so that they know people are completing the tasks and jobs, responsibilities assigned to them, but also it can be important for staff to be able to hold their leaders accountable. And so having that anonymous feedback in the modern era, I think is a really good way of doing that. Can you share some more examples of some of the meetings that you've had in the past or seen in other companies? Is it sort of the classic like Reddit ask me anything anonymously, or is there different metrics that people are measuring? A lot of companies, they're measuring their sales KPIs, their marketing targets. I think it's also interesting to maybe bundle in some key metrics to do with culture, maybe things like how engaged people are or how content or happy they're feeling. Are those things that you've seen implemented and questioned before?
Yeah, absolutely. But and I think now you're kind of connecting to things perfectly. You're like, thanks for setting it up there. Culture kind of does, accountability starts to become the other side of it, right? So it does need to flow both ways. Accountability from a leadership or management perspective downwards feels a little more clear. Here's my expectations from behaviorally, and here's my expectations from a performance perspective. But it needs to work the other way. And how it works the other way are strong communications, one-on-one feedback, perhaps anonymously. But I also need to be transparent about what my goal. If I have somebody I'm working with my team, I have told them what each of their goals and KPIs and metrics, whatever, are. But I also need to share what mine are. And when we're meeting, I'm reporting on mine and holding myself accountable and allowing them to challenge me and say, why are you held up here when this happens? This is how that flows downwards. And so it's a communication. We're a team. I'm not a dictator. we're a team. And it's like we have to sit there and say, wow, I need to reach a sales quota of $20,000 a month. I have 4 salespeople doing $5,000 a month. Well, eventually I have to be held accountable if there's non-performers or I'm not enabling them the right way. Or if I'm keeping one person who's not performing at all and it's preventing everybody else from getting their bonuses or whatever. There's all kinds of scenarios where poor leadership needs to be reflected on from below. And I think it's all through open communications, one-on-one dialogue, all of that.
So one of the things, the challenges that I kind of see with some of those one-on-ones, that those processes, feedback, people maybe challenging on what their responsibilities might be is the idea of like the ego, right? We all have one, depending on some of our interactions or what we see, what we hear. Your ego can become bruised, and certainly, in the corporate world, it can play a significant role in the company hierarchy, right? So, how do you begin to mitigate the ego when it comes to discussing and establishing processes, particularly around accountability?
I believe the clear answer to that is to get extremely clear and get mutual agreement up front on what metrics should look like and what goals are for those metrics. And also the accountability, the culture guide, and the accountability chart. So there's kind of 3 components here. Here's my expectations of behaviors. That's kind of a one-way conversation because the organization has said this is like me. Now I could be challenged and say, well, okay, but I need to hear these, I need to hear communication and feedback. Right. But that needs to be very, very clearly communicated. Here's how we behave. And here's the expectations, number 1. Number 2, here's exactly what you're accountable for. This is the job description. This role requires you to do X, Y, and Z. You have to be accountable to that. And you have to have on hire or on a move within the organization, we aren't forcing somebody to go do what they don't want to do. That's not going to work. It has to be mutual and it has to be agreement. But finally, to answer your question, where the ego comes, where you remove the ego, is to get alignment on what's your performance going to look like ahead of time. Don't reflect backwards without any prior agreement to what it would be. It can't be soft. You're going to meet these SLAs. You're going to hit this quota. You're going to do these things. You have this much time to do it. You agree, I agree. If you don't, this is kind of what happens. Mm. You have that kind of, and you get there, and now all of a sudden, excuses go out the window. So I believe at the end of the day, a well-run organization that's how it becomes more mature over time. Eventually, it's not interactions and conflict that create those problems. It becomes far more objective. It's less subjective. When you create a subjective conversation between two people, there's a lot of openness for emotions to enter. I got to the point where my tier one techs, for example, way back, if I go back 20 some years, a screen on the wall, all of their metrics, they could see how each other were performing. It was super transparent. And when somebody wasn't transforming, wasn't performing, it wasn't me having to go have a private conversation. The whole team could see it on the wall.
Right.
It was just obvious. It was as objective as it could possibly be. And there wasn't a lot of conflict or emotion involved. We've had low performers who were preventing others from receiving their team bonuses, kind of remove themselves from the team, and without any conflict, because it just becomes obvious because you've all agreed to a mutual outcome.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Do you think you can share like a story from your experience where you've seen someone maybe with the right intention, the right idea for a culture, what they want to do, and then maybe execute it in a completely wrong way? So kind of maybe heart in the right place, but the way they go about it wasn't particularly good?
Oh, all the time. So from a very technical perspective, I mean, I've seen folks who man, there's so many examples. I'm trying to figure out where to start. So I think, first of all, one thing that's really, really dangerous on a leadership team where their heart's in the right place is a manager or leader, especially an experienced one, has this challenge, right? They have this challenge to be completely aligned and transparent with the leadership team, but also represent the team that works for them. So I have worked with numerous leaders who have, with the best of intention, kind of become more defenders of their team than participants in leadership, and become at odds with the rest of leadership instead of doing what needs to be done with their team to correct actions. Very common. One thing that's important for a group or a team that gets together, especially a leadership team, is that they need to come in with their own ideas and thoughts and opinions to any situation or problem, right? They need to come in, positive conflict. Conflict's not a bad thing. Negative conflict or personal conflict is bad, but there should be positive conflict, right? We want that tension between sales and operations or whatever. We need that positive conflict. But when we agree to something, we walk out of the room like it was our idea in the first place, and we own it, and we never undermine each other. So sometimes with the best of intentions, leaders will go back and say, and they'll fail at that. I don't agree. I think all of you are right. I'm going to support you. And they undermine the rest of the team. And it not only undermines the leadership team in the organization, but it becomes a really bad message culturally in the organization. Like, we can kind of say something up here, but we can go do something else. Even if we feel like it's with the best of intentions, it undermines the rest of the organization. So I've seen it a number of times. I've seen somebody whose team was so opposed to using Microsoft Teams. I'll have to bring it right down to a really specific. They hated Microsoft Teams. They like Slack. The organization and leadership team made a decision to no longer use Slack. We sell Microsoft Cloud solutions. We're going to use Microsoft Teams. And then the leader of this particular team bought into it, but then went back to his team and said, you know what, you guys, we don't really have to do that. We're going to keep using Slack. It's a simple little example, But the message, what happened over time is the message was, we're unique, we're special, we can do whatever we want. The rest of the company be damned. And eventually that whole team became a separate culture and problematic with we had to blow up the entire thing, and that division got dissolved right out of the company.
That's a really good example. It sounds like a critical case of shadow IT, Jameson, which for any folks online who are interested, Augmentt may just have a solution that helps you with that. Jameson, just want to give you the opportunity as a thank you for coming on, and just do a quick plug on MSP+os. Maybe just give folks a little tidbit on what you guys do over there.
Yeah, just real briefly, super exciting to bring this team together. So it's the combination of 5 companies that XPM2 partners, Delta Vita, Sierra Pacific group, Stack Advisors, and ConnectStrat. And you may have heard of one or more of those organizations, but they're consultancies or coaching companies across the organization, across the MSP space, that have all kind of come together and said, we can build this incredible stack of services to help MSPs grow, acquire, really get their systems aligned. So at the top of the pyramid, kind of what ConnectStrat, what my team brought in was kind of that coaching for the ownership, leadership team, mid-level managers, anybody who needs group or one-on-one coaching to become better leaders, managers, and create more vision and direction for the organization. And then departmentally below, PSA consulting, UMN consulting, CPQ consulting, M&A and tool alignment consulting. So anything an organization would need to kind of offload, create more processes, systems, and even virtual administration of those areas of the business. I should add finance too, accounting and bookkeeping services. So quite a lot going on, and it's just fun to be a full stack consultancy across the MSP space.
So if you're an MSP feeling like you're kind of hacking through the jungle with your machete of, through the jungle with business, it doesn't have to be that way. You can head on over to msp+os and work and get advice from people who've been there, done it, and carved a path already that they're happy to show you where the trail is.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Great. Guys, just for those of you who are joining us, just quick plug on Augmentt. We're all about simplifying M365 security for Microsoft. So if you're an MSP who is managing Microsoft and fed up of it not being multi-tenant, always having to go in and manually secure policies and postures in there, track MFA, getting your alerts on the things that you want to see, Augmentt is definitely a platform that you should check out. So please head over to the website, book a demo, and see us there. Last question for you, Jameson, as we wrap up. Maybe can you give us an example or a story of the best culture that you've ever come across, and why? Why was it the best?
Well, I think one of the best cultures I've seen, I'll whittle it down to the MSP space. It's like I think there's a company I worked with in Minneapolis. I'm not going to name names. And I think what I saw there was a rapidly growing company where the owner was so vulnerable and transparent about what he was great at, where he was flawed. And he created a culture where everybody was willing to own who they were in a positive or negative way and openly communicate. I've rarely seen a company where that level of vulnerability works down below the leadership team to where trust was just absolutely rampant through the organization. I mean, you do see that to some degree. This particular organization grew very, very fast. MSP grew very, very fast, and continued to just the CEO kind of moved more towards a culture, just purely the culture guy, because and was very outspoken about how he was challenged, and all the good things and difficult things that he'd seen in his life, and it created a following like I've never seen. It was really interesting to watch. A good friend of mine. It was enjoyable to watch as he grew his business. But I think that vulnerability and transparency breeds trust. And when I see that really rampant in an organization, it's exciting to me.
Yeah, I love that. The idea that, kind of actually just being honest, being human, sharing your vulnerabilities and owning up to them empowers other people to do the same. And I feel like it's only once you do that and are aware of other people's weaknesses, that's not a big deal at a company. Again, you're the entrepreneur. You can hire people to cover those weaknesses to help build the bridges and really, harden your own team and make sure all your bases are covered. So that's a great point. Thanks for sharing. We're going to call it there, guys. That is time for today. Thank you so much for everyone for joining the first episode of Augmenttors. And thank you, Jamison West, for joining us and help us kickstart this initiative. Next month, I'll be joined by Matt Lee from Pax8 for an episode called Know Thy Enemy, Know Thyself, where we'll be taking a little bit of look into detail at some of the modern ways bad actors are getting up to all their dastardly deeds. Because if you know what they're up to, then you can ultimately help protect you and your clients. And we'll be making sure that that's nice and simple. So regardless of whether you're a marketer, a technician, a salesperson, completely brand new to the MSP space, the whole idea of this series is come and learn, take something away of value and implement it so that you can continue with your growth mindset. Jamison, once again, thank you so much. Enjoy the hot weather in Las Vegas and hope to see you soon on the road.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.